for you. I would like to can we just start out by introducing yourself and talking about what you teach and what age ranges that you teach. Maybe we can start with Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh Baer, and I teach comics mostly to adults, but I also teach kids. I've taught junior high school age, teenage age, and younger, like 7.
I'm Corinne Mucha, and I teach a pretty wide range also, primarily 8 to 10-year-old boys, it seems, is like, it's my audience right there. But ages like 6 to teenagers, and then sometimes adults who I treat like children, so.
I'm Walker Mettling. I teach, I'm in Providence, Rhode Island, and I teach comics at the library, and we publish books with the kids who are generally 8 to 12, but then I feel like I have like younger siblings and then like the teenagers that come in, and then also teach at high schools sometimes. And we publish books with the kids' work and then adult artists riffing and like getting assignments for the kids.
Oh, cool.
Oh.
Well. I brought my own mic. That's okay. I'm Nicole Georges. I live in Portland, and I teach ages 3rd grade on up through senior citizens. I teach in elementary schools and middle schools during the school year as an artist in residence. And then I teach high school as a writer in residence. And I teach adult classes at the IPRC's comic certificate program. And then I do a senior workshop every Friday. And that's it.
Great. Okay. I'll just talk about myself for a split second. But I do comics for younger readers, and I also teach comics sometimes at 826 and at DePaul University. So I guess I wanted to start off talking about your own education in comics, and if you did have some sort of formal training, and if you didn't have some sort of formal training, how you educated yourself in making comics, and then maybe talk a little bit about how that informs your teaching now. Does that make sense? Okay. I guess whoever wants to.
It's a really good question. Multi-level. Okay, so I'm trying to trace it back. Yeah, I had this experience of doing comics where I did comics when I was about 17 and 18. I was really influenced by like primitivists like Mark Bayer and like Raw Magazine. I was getting like a ton of. I graduated high school in '88, and Raw Magazine, whatever the issue came out that was on the tail end of Mouse, was really, really, really popular and going way mainstream. So like that work was kind of thrust in my face, and it had a big influence on me. And then I figured out like a whole different studio practice, and I kind of forgot how to do comics. So I had to find my way back into them in my 30s. And because I kept on trying in the late 90s, like to do comics, which I always loved, and couldn't do it. So it's a formal education was really important to me, and I have that, I have that in my pocket to offer to the kids. But it's a crapshoot. Like sometimes kids just need, they need a certain type of encouragement and be like enabled to like sort of, you need to let them run free. And then some kids, so some kids are never going to respond to like sort of a formal way of doing it. But I have had some success with it too. I guess it's that way with adults too. Some adults, they just need to find their own way to do it, and need to find like a way to make it fun. And I've had, the last time I taught, all the formal stuff I taught just fell completely flat. all the stuff about anatomy and teaching them how to do the tubes, you know, to do the limbs. Like, you break them down into cylinders. They just suck the life out of it. And then when I just had them do comics jams, like, they were actually shrieking with joy and getting completely, you know, passing them to each other and getting excited about the other kids' characters. So I don't want to hog the mic. Somebody else have an answer?
Yeah, you go.
Okay. I like, as far as my education in comics, when I was a kid, I was like really into, you know, drawing from life, drawing still lives, all that kind of stuff. And my dad was like, "Oh, when I was a kid, I made comics. You should make comics." And I was like, "Dad, I am a real artist, okay? I am so above that." And so eventually he kind of like wore me down a little bit, and he signed me up for like a cartooning class. And I remember making like gag comics in it, I think maybe like 4-panel cartoons. And I thought it was the dumbest thing that anybody made me do in my whole life. And I was just like, I'm back to still lives, you know? I just want to draw some plants and some shoes. And did that for a really long time. Anyway, so I guess it's ironic now that I'm a cartoonist and that also I'm a comics instructor, and I teach kids that age, and I'm like trying to force them to like comics, and maybe all they want to do is draw still lives. I don't know. But I took one comics class in college, and then all the rest of my sort of like comics education has just been like, you know, drawing in my sketchbook or whatever, like figuring things out as I go along. But the way I teach is actually a lot more structured than the way like my own learning has been. And it's probably not even necessarily like the way that I would have wanted to learn how to draw comics. And it's partially because I teach, most of my teaching I do at a charter school here in Chicago, and my curriculum has to follow both like Chicago Public Schools standards of learning, and then also it's a international baccalaureate school. So it also has to somehow follow like the IB learner profile. So I'm supposed to be using comics to teach kids things like, I am principled, I am knowledgeable, I am respectful, I am disciplined, which actually comics do really well, except that my curriculum ends up being like a lot more regimented than I think it probably would be if I was just like, let's just make comics and have fun. Anyway, that's my answer.
Well, in terms of education, I think I was pretty self-taught. I'm hearing you mention 826. I used to be at 826 Valencia in San Francisco, and we would make, I think, a lot of the stuff that we kind of do with the kids has kind of come out with that, because we would make a book in 2 hours. And so the idea of like sending the kids home with like an actual like physical item, I feel like came out of that. And I was doing illustrations for those. There would be a field trip come in, and you know, we would the kids would basically write a story, and there would be an illustrator who is doing illustrations. Then bang, you know, after 2 hours, all the kids would leave with a copy of the book, which I think I was really impressed with. I am a devotee of Linda Berry, as I'm sure a lot of people are. And I think I'm totally into the philosophy of like, I don't know, treating kids' work like real seriously or something. And I've done other projects where I've directed plays that were written by kids with like adult actors and like fun stuff with that. So I think a lot of this stuff is, you know, maybe I'm answering the wrong question. I don't know. But anyways, riffing. So I think a lot of my angle with teaching is kind of coming at it from maybe an organizer perspective in some ways. I used to do like tenant organizing, community organizing, and working with unions. And at a certain point, I realized that I was like, I want to do art stuff with kids and weird people. And I think I'm like good at like phone trees and emailing people. And like, okay, so I want to see you kids do stuff, you know. I want you know, blah, blah, blah. We're going to do this assignment. Everybody's going to do it. And then, you know, and and we'll actually have like guest artists there doing it as well, and it's kind of this awesome thing. Like, I think maybe that's kind of how my mind works. I like seeing the same, like different versions of the same thing. So I think a lot of my teaching is kind of like that, in terms of like getting kids to look at what other people are doing and get other like artists in the room, and I don't know, have them all kind of, I think there's a lot of osmosis in terms of what I'm practicing, in terms of like, I don't know, my work with kids.
Cool. So what my education is and then how I got into educating kids. I'm a self-taught artist. I dropped out of high school to watch Matlock and go to hardcore fests in the Midwest in the 90s. So that's my background. And I've been making zines and comics since I was 13 years old. And I, always drew, and I never drew exactly right. And I still don't draw exactly right, but I've just been drawing the same way so long that now I just have a lot of comics. And I fell into teaching comics the same way, where I wanted to volunteer at the zine store, Reading Frenzy, when I moved to Portland, but the owner didn't really like me. She thought I was too excited, or she just didn't like my energy, so she sent me upstairs to the IPRC, which is the Independent Publishing Resource Center, which is kind of like a community art and education space specifically geared towards independent publishing. And I volunteered there for a while, and then somebody dragged me along with them to a high school workshop with at-risk teens, and they wanted to do their zine about like basketball and weed and Tupac and Jesus and like seduction. And they were 16-year-olds at end of the line high school, and they like asked me if I was pregnant because I had a belly, and I was like, wow, I'm so frightened of children and I really don't like them. But then I just kept doing it, and I kept going to more and more things, teaching zines and comics, and then eventually I did it so long I was the education director at the IPRC, or the outreach coordinator, and I started a zine I worked at Zine Camp, and I started, this is off topic, but I started something called the Zine Canteen, which I would go to all these schools and teach them about comics or zines and then just leave. And I was like, well, this feels like it's in a weird vacuum. What are these kids going to do if they like doing comics or zines and you're in 5th grade? What are you going to do if your parents aren't supportive? And so at the IPRC, I started a day where it was kids only, and there would be a trained volunteer there. And I tried to make it widely known that it was kids only, so the parents knew they could drop them off at this community art space without a bunch of creepy adults around. So we started something called the Zine Canteen, and it's still there 6 years later. And so kids can go from one of these workshops and then come and have a place to work with professional comic artists or zine writers and have access to photocopy machines and paper and ink and stuff. So that's nice. But right now I don't work for the IPRC anymore with kids. I work, like I said, as an artist in residence, which happened by chance. Also, somebody had heard about my work with the IPRC and recruited me. So now I just go and I do like 5 or 6 session residencies at middle schools and elementary schools. And I have to work with curriculum too. Like in Portland specifically, which seems crazy, but there's like no budget for arts. They've cut the budget for arts. So only 25% of schools there have an art specialist, also known as an art teacher. And many of them are getting PE cut too. So now they hire freelance people like me to come in, but then they try to cram some curriculum in with it too during the 5 days I'm there to teach them comics. So we'll do comics about like Lewis and Clark, like the Lewis and Clark adventure, or like memoir, my 5th grade, or like my elementary school memories and stuff. So yeah, that's what I end up doing there.
Okay. I feel like we've just like opened up so many separate cans of worms, but I guess I just want to start getting into the actual classroom and talk about how you go about teaching comics. Comics take a lifetime to learn for cartoonists, and I guess I'm wondering, in your classroom, how much you can teach in one class. And how successful, I don't know, maybe just think about that. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I feel like I mean, when you're teaching kids, part of the issue can be that they work at such different paces. So maybe you've got like an hour, you've got some kids that you're worrying about, like, there's so much information I want to teach you, like, how are you ever going to be able to get all of this done within an hour? And then you've got another kid sitting right next to him who's just like, all right, 5 minutes, I just made the zombie story, it's completely finished, you know? So then you have to kind of find a way to balance your time between like spending time with that kid being like, okay, like, but what else happens to the zombies? And then like the kid sitting next to him who's just like, you know, making the most painstaking drawing ever, being like, what if you drew a little faster? What if you like finished a comic this class, you know? Yeah. I mean, in the most of my classes, we work towards them going home with their own self-published mini comic. Well, self-published meaning that I publish it for them, and then they get to take it home. And they're like, look, I made a book, which is always, it's interesting because when you tell kids that you're going to make a book for them, they get really excited, but they also want to know some specifics, like, where is this book going to be? What, like, is it going to have a spine? And sometimes they're excited when you hand it to them, and other times they're like, this isn't a book.